As with any criminal case, we need to know the elements of the offense. The elements of the offense are part of a set of outlined facts the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt in order to prevail in any case. The prosecution must be able to state the elements clearly and prove each and every one of them. The elements of the offense may differ depending on the crime, but they carry through a case from start to finish. They also will slightly vary state by state. As a result, we're going to talk about the federal statutes and use one particular case as a guide. You will need to look up the statutes in your state to see how they differ from the federal statute, if in fact they do. It's important to remember it. In many ways, prescription drug cases are similar to other types of drug cases. There must be intent, meaning the criminal act must be voluntary or purposeful, and it refers to the defendant's state of mind at the time of the offense. Then there is also the conduct itself. A criminal act or unlawful commission of an act must have occurred. The conduct and intent must occur at the same time, and the criminal intent must precede or coexist with the criminal act. Then there is also causation. An element of actual harm must have occurred. Keep in mind that the burden of proof is different for law enforcement and prosecutors. For law enforcement, the burden is probable cause, while for prosecutors, they must prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt.
By the time the prosecutor sees it or hears about it, usually an agency has brought it to you. Immediately start working with that agent, trying to identify what your objectives are. Identify the person or persons or location where this activity is taking place. Identify what your objectives are and do those intelligence or investigative objectives first. Because you can't wait to the end to work that kind of case. There are steps that need to be taken right off the bat. Start doing your surveillance, start gathering information before you can get to the end, which as far as investigation is concerned, is a search warrant. Because there's so much after the search warrant is executed, you have to synthesize the information that you receive, synthesize the evidence, and turn it into something you can get to an expert or experts to get to the point of proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt. I've always tried to say this to young prosecutors and young agents. Very often they'll use the word probable cause. Well, probable cause gets you a search warrant, gets you an arrest. It doesn't convict anybody. Use a different standard. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Start your case, your investigation with those agents, keeping that standard in mind, because that's what a jury is going to hear. They want to be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. In working those cases, sometimes I work with a thought in my mind, how's my closing argument going to go? What is the last words I want the jury to hear before they walk out of that courtroom and make a decision? I try to put myself in the jury box. What do I want to hear? What do I want to see? What do I want to understand? Because if you can put yourself in that jury box, I think it helps you develop your case all along. I think it helps you present your case in open court and helps you present that final closing argument.
The need to prove unlawful possession is what makes these types of cases unique. Possession of pills in and of itself can be totally legal. It is only the unlawful possession of pills that can be prosecuted. So in order to prove these cases, law enforcement and prosecutors must prove unlawful possession, intent to break the law, the fact that the suspect knowingly possessed the substance, and that it is in fact a controlled substance. Sometimes these elements are difficult because prescription drugs are legally prescribed, so proving the intent to break the law can be extremely difficult for investigators and prosecutors. Remember that if a person is arrested with pills and has a prescription, investigators and prosecutors will want to prove whether it is valid or not.
You have to prove that the person who has the drugs really either forged the prescription, you have to prove that the prescription's not actually valid, that they didn't need the medications. If they got it through fraud, then we need to take those steps to prove the fraud itself. If they bought a prescription pad or forged prescription pad, stole prescription pads and then forged them, we need to take those steps to prove that. So you always have that inherent defense of valid prescription, and so we're always going to have to disprove that.
In court, we are asking average citizens, as jurors, to make decisions, even though they have no prior legal education or training. To assist them in that regard, juries get instructions from the court, which tells them what the law is in a particular case. So let's look at a particular case and look at the elements of the offense that the prosecutors will need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. The case is United States versus Feingold. Jeffrey Feingold was a naturopathic physician in the state of Arizona who was convicted on 185 counts of illegally distributing controlled substances under the Controlled Substances Act. During the trial in 2006, the government needed to prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt: that the defendant distributed a controlled substance, that the defendant distributed the controlled substance knowingly and intentionally, and that the defendant prescribed or distributed the controlled substance other than for a legitimate medical purpose and not in the usual course of professional practice. This is a key to a prescription drug case involving a medical professional. Unlike other individuals, doctors are legally authorized to distribute controlled substances. That means the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the distribution was outside the usual course of professional practice. In the Feingold case, even though Feingold had a license to distribute controlled substances during some of the time in question, he often did not physically examine patients. He gave prescriptions to patients he knew were drug addicts. He wrote prescriptions in exchange for services like house painting, and he prescribed in excess of the maximum recommended dosages. Those points, among others, were key to the case and the prosecution proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt.